Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid Radio Program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Hey folks, that's me, Scotty Roberts, and that's my show, the Intrepid Radio Program, right here on my YouTube channel, and soon to be in many other places, as we've already alluded to in the past. But you can find us also on Facebook, over on my Facebook page, the Intrepid Radio Facebook page. You can find us on my X account and also on my Instagram account. So go over and hook up over there. And thank you for being here tonight, everybody. This is the Intrepid Radio Program, broadcasting to you live. And it's Wednesday night. How's everybody doing tonight? Elderberry, good evening. Monica S., good evening. Good to see you. And glad you're back today. I think Monday was your first experience in the chat room here on the Intrepid Radio Program. Let me get rid of that header, and let's just, for shits and giggles, we will throw up what I like to call my proscenium arch. There it is. Those of you in theater know exactly what I'm talking about. So, everybody, welcome. Glad you could be here tonight. What's going on in your world? The same thing that's going on in mine? Are you watching the DNC? The Democratic National Convention. I haven't watched any of it live, but I've seen bits and pieces, and I've caught things that are being said. And one of the things that stood out to me is, now, of course, RNC, DNC, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, and I don't see any libertarian conventions or Green Party conventions, probably because they are small enough that they can't throw these kinds of events. But I'm watching these events, and the marketing that goes into them is unbelievable. Now, perhaps I am biased. I look at the RNC. Now, I'm not a Republican, but I am a conservative. And I watched the RNC, and I didn't get that same, we are a Hollywood production, and we have to just jazz everybody up. And I didn't see a lot of, now again, this will depend on what side of the aisle you fall on with your political ideologies, but I watched it and I didn't see a lot of lies coming out of there. I didn't see a lot of trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. I saw an awful lot of, this is what it is. We're stating this for what it is. Now, do politicians lie and tell stories? All the time. But I am watching little clips and things from the DNC, and there was something that impressed me about former First Lady Michelle Obama last night. She was talking to the audience about, I don't even remember how she got to this point in her presentation, but she said something about the rich or the wealthy or billionaires, whatever it might be, that are backing. She was, in a sense, saying, I'm paraphrasing dramatically here, the other party, which is made up of billionaires, are going to present things this way. Well, my mom told me when I was growing up, or my parents told me, or her grandparents, I don't remember which it was, they said something about when you make enough money, you don't have to make so much money that you're taking too much. And of course, the House applauds that and everything. And she's referring to people who have billions of dollars. Now, of course, this was rich. To me, immediately what popped into my mind was, isn't this the former president? Because I've talked about it in the past, a long time ago. Isn't this the former president who entered into the White House in his first term worth about $1.5 million? And when he exited the White House, was worth about $70 million. Now, isn't this the same woman who's married to the man, and they together own 3 mansions? They have a mansion in Palm Springs. They have a mansion in Martha's Vineyard. and they have a mansion in Hawaii. How many common Americans who can say, wow, those rich people are taking more than they deserve, have 3 mansions in 3 very high profile states? So anyway, that's oh, sorry about that, Elderberry. You got a commercial in here already? I don't control those. That's all YouTube. That's one of the things I don't like about broadcasting on YouTube is they throw in their commercials at places. And sometimes they don't pause the show. They just throw the commercial in over the content. So that's why I make, a couple bucks a month off of YouTube. So what I was saying, just for your sake, Elderberry, and anybody who missed it, is that she said her grandmother told her, Michelle Obama, that talking about rich people, watch out for those rich people who take more than they need. And this is what's very interesting about that is that you look at the person who's saying that, Michelle Obama. And what I mentioned is worth repeating. Barack Obama had $1.5 million was his net worth when he entered the White House. And when he left the White House, it was over 70 million. Okay, well, fine. So he made a lot of money being president. Then you've got the fact that she's up there saying this. Don't take more than you deserve. In other words, I'm paraphrasing. Don't take more than you need. Don't take too much from people. And trying to decry the billionaire out there that's on the other side of the aisle, running in opposition to them. And yet this is coming from a woman who she and her husband own 3 mansions. Palm Springs, 1 in Hawaii, 1 in Martha's Vineyard. That is not average American. And that is somebody who, if you hear screaming, by the way, and banging on the floor, if you hear screaming, banging on the floor, people stomping down the stairs, that is my young child having a tantrum. So pardon that. That's the beauty of broadcasting from home. The familial interruptions are wonderful. So you haven't caught my wife yelling at her yet, using some very colorful language. That hasn't come through tonight, but you hear the kids pounding. One kid in particular. Nah, it's not the birthday boy. That was yesterday. It's the young child. So anyway, the beauty, once again, of being a professional studio running out of my home without soundproof walls. So that's something that struck me. And that's where I started this off. The show tonight isn't about the DNC. It's not about the election. It's not about politics. But I think it's worth mentioning a few things as you see them happen. And that was one of them. That is a moment, I think, of what I would consider to be a hypocritical moment. Maybe she had some good things to say from her political point of view. That's fine. She can talk. But when you say something like that, and yet your lifestyle is very different than what you've just decried, that tends to be hypocritical in some people's books. Of course, you can't call that out. You call that out, you say, hey, that was kind of hypocritical. You're going to have somebody from the other side go, well, yeah, what about that time that he said? It's like, I'm not looking at it for that. I take things piece by piece, bit by bit. And so I found that to be hypocritical. On the same note, yes, what can I do for you? You who is not supposed to just come in and walk in on the broadcast because you've been told that at least 17 dozen times. What can I do for you now that you're here?
I need you to write this.
I can't write that. I'm doing radio right now. That can wait till later, or Mom can do that for you, okay?
No.
Don't bring a permission slip for me to sign while I'm doing radio.
It's not a permission slip.
What is it?
It's a hope and dream you have to write for me.
So you want me to write something like a mini essay while I'm doing radio?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that can wait. Bye.
Okay,
See ya.
my ears.
Okay. She did her hair. She wants to show you. There it is. Okay, bye. See ya. I love you. Scram.
Hey.
All right. Here we go. Let's get back at it. All right, folks. So there you go. That's my take on what Michelle Obama had to say. And I don't like that kind of thing. I don't like almost every clip I've heard coming out of the DNC is telling us how, did you realize that the last 16 years, only 4 of them were occupied by Donald Trump. The other 12 were Obama, Biden, Obama and Biden. And but out of those 4 years that Trump had, supposedly this is all the damage that has been done to our country that they now need to fix. And he was out of office 4 years ago. So isn't it usually the president who resides for 4 years in the office is the one, the next guy, well, I got to blame this. My predecessor did this and that. Well, you know what? Kamala's predecessor, who is it? Herself and Joe Biden. You're not hearing a lot of that. And this is why they're avoiding the press. This is hypocrisy to me. This is dishonesty. Now, I will give them this. That's great marketing strategy because they're wooing the public. And why should they have to sit down for an interview? Why should they correct anything? They're wooing the public. Their goal is not to present an honest Kamala Harris. Their goal is to retain the office and the position. And if that's what their goal is, it's not one of serving the people. So I honestly believe, for what you think of him, faults and all, I believe Donald Trump serves the people. And, he just serves himself. Okay, yeah. You pull this leg and it'll play Jingle Bells. You're not watching if you can believe that. You have not been watching. You're listening to the one-liners that are out there, and that's it. So let me take this whole political thing I started off with and move it over here. And we shall not talk about it again, other than to say, let me pull that back. Kamala Harris, she's been in office for almost 1,200 days. Do you think she could have prevented any of this that's happened? Why is she waiting till she gets elected to fix the problems that she was part of creating after she's been in office? Why are they distancing her from being in the White House for the last 4 years? That's a good question. You got to ask that. The people that are supporting her need to ask that. But see, that's the thing. It doesn't matter to them. Okay, this whole thing now, pushing it off, going off stage. We're going to get to our topic of the night tonight. I thought that stuff was worth mentioning. This show, we don't just open up. It's not like you're coming to a class. Class, thank you for being here. Welcome back today. Turn in your syllabus to page 17 where we left off last time, and we're going to continue our lecture. That's not what we do here. We talk about stuff here. And current events is one of those things in the stuff category. So let's carry on. How is everybody doing? We don't have a lot of you in the chat room tonight. Not that I have any problem with those of you who are here. I don't see many people. There's a lot of people out there, according to my numbers over here, and you're not in the chat room. Come on over. And also, I have a tip for you. If you're going to get into broadcasting of any kind, doing a podcast, doing a radio show, one of the good things I have learned, and which I was reminded of just now a few seconds ago, is don't have any of your wife's amazing avocado onion dip, chip dip. She had avocados and she mashed them all up, ground them all up, and made a guacamole dip. And I said, wow, that's tasty. She said, it's really heavy on the onion. I put too much onion in. I said, no, it tastes good. You know what it's doing? I'm talking here. It's bouncing back on me. I am now paying the price for having 15 minutes before the show started, ate a bunch of her guacamole, her homemade avocado guacamole dip. Here, cheers. I'm going to try to drink some of that down. Mm. So here we are. Come to the topic of the night. And this is something where we left off the other day. And keep in mind, what I'm talking about with this whole issue, it's not an issue, the topic of this, well, here, you can see it here. Easiest way to define it. The unseen realms. We started that Monday night. We're doing it continuing tonight. Tonight, we're going to focus on the divine council. And is there really a pantheon of gods? We kind of left off talking about that on Monday night. And the reason I'm doing this series, to me, this is that what is to me, it's like Ancient Aliens, or it's like Ghost Hunters, or the paranormal shows. This is another topic for me that is incredibly interesting because it takes something that has been time honored and maybe a lot of people believe in, and it challenges us to think about faith issues. Now, whether you are a Christian or a Jew, doesn't matter, because we are focusing on books from their books. You can be any religion and look at this. We have a country that supposedly has been a God-oriented country founded on Christian principle. And that is true, by the way. It was founded on Christian principle, Judeo-Christian principle. There's nothing wrong with admitting that. People so try to distance themselves from that. But we could do a whole dissertation on what makes our laws based, and the way our founders acted, based on Christian tradition. That's okay. So what I want to look at is the fact that many of us who know the Bible went to Sunday schools, synagogue, whatever we did as a kid, and we learned a lot of these stories and a lot of these principles and concepts of the Bible. Why are there things that we didn't hear about? What about the weird stuff? What about the dark stuff? What about the supernatural, the stuff that smacks of the supernatural? What about divine rebellions in the heavens? Why don't we hear about those things? What about all the different, I'm looking at the different topics I have in here. Ruling over angels, the great reversals, the cloud rider, the supernatural intent of the Bible, all of this. Why did we miss those things in Sunday school? It's because we were taught differently. And we were taught about things that many pastors, many teachers in Christianity and Judaism, we're going to skip that stuff because that stuff's a little too outside their wheelhouse. Even for those trained in theology, there were things that they didn't want to get into because they were so oriented on what their ministry was supposed to be about. I remember talking to my pastor, who I've mentioned many times in the past, John Larson. We called him Parson Larson. Well, a handful of us did. Parson Larson. And when I questioned him about some of these things, the very thing I'm going to talk about tonight, when I was writing some of my books, he said to me, you know what? He says, Scotty, you might be right. And that kind of surprised me. He says, look, our ministry here at this church is to reach out to people and to bring people in, to teach them about God, about Jesus, about the resurrection, about salvation. And some of this other stuff you're talking about, he says, we're all familiar with that. He says, but that's not the point of our ministry here. So we avoid those things. We don't get into that deeper, wilder stuff. He says, because the ministry is focused on drawing people in and helping families, helping people in troubled marriages, helping communities and neighborhoods. So, and that made a lot of sense to me. But I thought, maybe this is why I didn't hear a lot of these things. But in general, as I went on, I found that people are genuinely fascinated by this whole supernatural. I'm going to recap a little bit from last night to catch us up. We're fascinated by the supernatural, fascinated by the superhuman. Look at our television shows, our novels, our books, literature. How much of pop culture is based on supernatural things? I look at the young adults readers section at the bookstore, and it's like most of that section of books seems to be all about witchcraft and supernatural and fantasy realms and things like that are all geared to the teenage reader, the young adult reader, and not teaching witchcraft, but books about it, like Harry Potter, like I'm trying to think of some of the things you can identify television shows and books and everything along the way. Why do those things exist? Because we have a fascination with it. They're an escape from the ordinary. Sarah says you have to make a distinction between supernatural and preternatural. Yes, there is a distinction between those two. Let's look up some definitions, just to make the point. What is the supernatural? I have always said that I believe we're not in a supernatural realm, that we are in the natural realm, and everything that appears to be supernatural is actually just the natural, because it all exists. Supernatural, by definition, a manifestation or an event attributed to some force that's beyond a scientific understanding of the laws of nature. That is the going definition of supernatural. Now, if you look at preternatural, that's going to be something a little different. It's beyond what is normal, beyond what's natural. So it's just the things that are beyond. And there is a difference between supernatural and preternatural. Preternatural can include unusual things that are natural, but out of the ordinary. Think nature, things that happen in nature. Like I've talked about the parting of the Red Sea and that geological event that takes place once in a rarity, maybe once a century, if even that, where the winds blow in off the east and part the waters. Is this what Moses encountered? Now, if that is a preternatural thing, if we attribute it to miracles, or you can look at Bigfoot, would be preternatural. If there's such a thing as Bigfoot, I believe there is. I believe there's enough evidence to say there is something there. It's not just all manufactured and made up. So supernatural is beyond the scope of those natural things. And it goes into the spirit world where God, angels, and demons all abide. That's the difference between the two. And so I think when you're talking even biblical concepts, oh wait, what does JP say? Shit so blowing up over Israel. Got to bounce to get the skinny on it. I'll be back. Oh, I want to hear what's going on. Tune back in, Jason. Let us know what's going on. So maybe we need to take a little cut right now and look at news on Israel. What's going on? I've got from the AP News, Israel, Hamas war, the latest Israel tank and drone strikes kill at least 17 people in Gaza. All right. This was as of 6:18 CDT. What is CDT? Central Date Time? That was today. So that there were 17 killed in Gaza. I don't know what's happened since that. I'm not seeing a something new on that. We'll let JP come back to us and tell us what all is going on. in the meantime, let's carry on with what we're talking about with the unseen realm. So let's get back over there to my notes on the unseen realm, and we'll continue on with that. So people are drawn to all kinds of things, all kinds of weird, supernatural, preternatural events, and we've got our literature and our pop culture to prove it. On the other level, there are people that are drawn into all the other worlds because, as the book of Ecclesiastes put it in the Old Testament, God has put eternity into our hearts. That's in Ecclesiastes. And that there's something about the human condition, about being human, and about our experience that longs for something beyond our experience. What's your life like? Let me ask you. Do you ever feel like I'm satisfied? I like my life the way it is. I like these things. Why do we say Sarah just took a trip to England? Why do we go to England? Why do we do things like that? For Sarah, part of it, there were friends and relatives there. But we go because we want to see things that are outside the norm of who we are. That's why I travel and do things. That's why I've done some of the weird things I've gotten involved with, some of the travel I've gotten involved with, my trips to Egypt. All of those things were to explore. My trips to Great Britain, my trips to Central America. All of that stuff were things that I wanted to know and see. We want to reach out to something that is beyond who we are and what we are, and we pull ourselves up into that. That's a little Adler for you, Freud versus Adler. And so there were these things that even Paul, who wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, he wrote about this yearning too. And he thought that it comes from just being alive in the world that God made. That creation bears witness to a creator and therefore to a realm beyond our own. That's in Romans chapter 1. And Paul said this impulse was so powerful that it had to be willfully suppressed. Now, I don't know why you'd suppress that. Maybe manage it, control it. Maybe that's what he meant by suppressed. But we don't seem to think of the epic story of the Bible in the same way that we think of our own tales of the supernatural in books and movies and legend. And I think there's good reason for that. And the tales in the Bible go beyond the lack of special effects. For some, the Bible's characters are too ordinary, too grandfatherly, too patriarchal. They don't feel dynamic. They don't feel heroic to some people. Although I think there's a hell of a lot of heroism and heroic character within the pages of the Bible. And these same people in the same stories that we've been hearing since our Sunday school days as little kids, there's this cultural barrier that's been built up. It's hard for us to identify with what seems like an endless parade of ancient shepherds, men wearing robes, growing their beards long. It's like so many actors in a church musical, you know? We used to do those in the church where Parson Larson was my pastor. We put on a beautiful, we had a beautiful drama department. And we put on skits and sometimes short skits on Sunday mornings, and then big productions once a year. I remember being cast in one of those, and because I was in the church and I sang, and some very big, almost Les Miserables quality to them. And yes, we didn't have the millions of dollars to do the lighting and the sets, but we built sets. I painted backdrops. I helped design sets and build sets. I helped design costumes. What was interesting is I said, if we're going to do a biblical play set in biblical times, let's look like we lived back then. And one of the guidebooks that I used at the time, we're talking back in the mid 90s. And we were doing a play and I used a book on. Do you remember the miniseries Jesus of Nazareth that came out with Robert Powell playing Jesus? And it was a miniseries that came out in the mid 1970s. But it was so gritty realistic in the costuming, the settings, and everything. It was one of the best productions, even though I didn't necessarily like the guy who played Jesus, and I didn't like the way he was portrayed, things like that. But I found that the costuming, the sets, and all of that made it real. And so I used a book of that, with the photo book of that miniseries I said, let's use this to design costumes. And they did. The costume department took that and did it. And so we put on these great productions because we wanted to express those things in a different way to people. But yeah, so our church has a nativity play. We did it at Easter more than nativity. Sarah says, Jesus seemed to draw a distinction between nickel and diming the letter of the law rather than using the law to help other people. Right. Now, also, Sarah, I don't have the passage reference, the chapter verse on my mind, but Jesus also said about the law. He basically, I'm going to paraphrase him. He said, you guys, you think the law was given to try to be something that you can follow. He says, you can't. He says, the law is a schoolmaster to show you that you cannot be perfect in God's eyes. This is something Jesus said. The law is a schoolmaster to bring you to the awareness of the fact that you need God, because you can't do this on your own. That was the interesting thing about the law that Jesus said. Yeah, the law is there to help people. It's not there to nickel and dime people to death. Say, oh, look what you did. You infracted. Jesus said the law is written so that there's none of you can be without excuse before God, and that you need God to take over. He says that's what the law is about. Not for you to act like the law. He says, yes, it's a guideline, but that's not, it's there to show you that you're imperfect. And that's the only reason. And that was Jesus himself saying that, which I found very interesting. So I think an even bigger factor in why all of these things that we become involved with, science fiction, supernatural fantasy stories, why does it capture our imagination more easily, is how we've been taught to think about the unseen world, the unseen realms that we find in Scripture. And what I've heard in church over the years doesn't just miss the boat, it makes the supernatural boring. And even worse, the church's teaching emasculates the unseen, emasculates the supernatural world, denudes it, renders it powerless. And a lot of what Christians and Jews and people who follow the precepts of the Bible imagine to be true about the unseen world isn't true at all. Angels don't have wings. We talked about this last night. Cherubim don't count because they're never called angels. And they're creaturely, but they're not angels. Angels are always in human form in the Bible and Scripture. Demons don't sport horns and a tail. They aren't here to make us sin, because we do that just fine on our own. The law being a schoolmaster. While the Bible describes demonic possession in rightfully awful ways, intelligent evil has more sinister things to do than to make sock puppets out of people. And on top of that, angels and demons are minor players in Scripture. Church never seems to get the big boys and their agenda. And this is kind of where we left off the other night. Sarah says, Jesus, what it says, stories like parables teach us how to live. Yeah. not flying babies. Exactly. Exactly, Sarah. Of course, I don't know of any flying babies in Scripture, but um, man, we sure got taught a lot of stuff that's not in Scripture, and we sure avoided a lot of things that is. But this is where I came to tonight and left off the other night, is that the gods, plural, are real. I asked you at the very beginning, do you really believe what the Bible says? And I kind of went into a bit of a pop quiz. The Bible says God has a task force of divine beings who carry out his decisions. It's referred to as God's assembly, his council, or his court. They're called in different places in the Scripture. One of the clearest verses about it is one that we've mentioned many times, is Psalm 82, where I've talked about it in relation to the Elohim and the Nephilim and all of that when talking about Genesis 6 and the Nephilim and so on. But in Psalm 82, verse 1, it says, God presides in the heavenly council. In the assembly of the gods, he gives his decisions. So if you think about it, that's really a startling verse for a lot of people who grew up thinking, well, there's only one God. What? There's a council of gods? And I remember I told you my story in seminary the other night. I repeated that story of how when I first brought that story up to the president of our seminary, he said, what is this? What is this stuff with angels, not angels, Elohim descending down to earth, gods, it says. The sons of God descended to the earth and had children with women. What is that? Who is it? You think of that. Think of that. When I first read that, it was about 40 years ago. And there weren't all these movies on this stuff and books on this stuff and internet and all that. And it's like, what is this? This is mysterious stuff. And the original Hebrew word that translates gods in Genesis 6, look at Genesis 6, in the first few verses, talks about, and the sons of God came down and intermingled with the daughters of men and had children by them. In the Hebrew, the sons of God, the Bnei Ha Elohim. And so we've covered this so many times on this show, this particular topic, that I'm not going to go into it in great detail again, but it's the Elohim. And the original word for gods, plural, is Elohim. And Elohim stood for gods. It stood for the little brass idols and clay idols and wooden carved idols that you could go buy in some guy's tent. And God said, avoid those. Don't buy those idols, those Elohim. But it also stood for the power of God. It was the name of God used 2,700 times in the Old Testament. And it was the name that God himself, Elohim, used for his council of gods. In, again, Psalm 82. And God stood before the gods and said, you are all gods. In the English, in the original Hebrew, and Elohim stood in the midst of the Elohim. And he, singular, said to them, plural, and so on and so on. You are all Elohim, he said to them. Could that refer to the Trinity? No, Luke. The ancient Hebrews didn't have a Trinity in the same way that we think of the Trinity by Christian definition. And that was Luke over in the chat room asking that question. No, it was talking about the council of gods, that God went out. If you have a Trinity, you have God the Father, the Son, then the Holy Spirit, the three in one. What the Old Testament talks about is an actual council of the gods. And that here, I'll get into this a little bit. If you think about it, that's pretty amazing stuff. And like any verse, Psalm 82 verse 1 has to be understood in the context of what else the Bible says. And in this case, what it says about the gods, the Elohim, and how that term should be defined. Remember, Elohim, in the Hebrew, El was the name for God, E-L, El. And you had many of the archangels, Michael, which is Michael, Raphael, Gabriel. They were all had the suffix of God put on. They were of God. But you have El is the name of God. And Him at the end of the word denotes plurality in the Hebrew. So Elohim, one word, that word means God of or among many gods. What do you do with that? 2,600 times in the Old Testament, God is called Elohim. Then God uses the same exact term to speak of a council by whom he passes matters, and they need to, in a sense, cast votes. They need to enact certain things that he will then decree as presiding over the council. I believe Lucifer, Sarah asks, did Lucifer wish to rise to the level of Elohim? I believe Lucifer was an Elohim. He was not Malach, which is angel. And that's the way you can tell in the Hebrew language, Malach, angel, or it came to mean the same thing as messenger. Lucifer was the star of the morning, he was called. I believe he was one of the Elohim. As a matter of fact, when I go into my study on the Nephilim, and we talk about Adam and Eve and in the Garden of Eden, you look at that story in the Hebrew scripture. It calls the serpent character, it calls him Nakash. And Nakash simply means bright shining one. It doesn't mean snake. Nakash means bright shining one, bringer of knowledge. There were a couple of other words that go along with that, but the bright shining one. And even Moses, when he cast the bronze serpent in the desert and put it up on a pole so people could be healed by God from the serpent bites, all they had to do was look to the serpent on the pole. Moses called it was referred to in the Hebrew as the Nakash. So you've got Nakash, the serpent character in the Bible, in Genesis. You've got the Nakash, the bronze serpent raised on the pole. Then you go to, once again, back to Psalm 82. These bright shining ones, God refers to the divine council, the Elohim, as the bright shining ones of heaven, relating again to the bright shining one of the Nakash, or Nakash, in the Garden of Eden story. So God's government might be a good way to look at it, sir. That is a good way to look at it. So Elohim is a plural word. It's a word that stands for singular, and it's a word that stands for plural. In God, it calls him Elohim, God of many gods. With the other Elohim, God refers to them as gods in the plural. You are all Elohim, he said to them. And by the way, Luke, this is another part of an answer to your question in the chat room. It says, and God, or Elohim, stood in the midst of the Elohim, and he said to them, you are all Elohim, the bright shining princes of heaven. That's more than just the Trinity. So this word can be plural, it can be singular. I've described it as our word deer. I see a singular deer in my front yard. Oh, look, there's the whole herd of deer, same word, in the backyard. Plurality. So the word could be used singularly or plurality. You had to look at the context within the sentence in the Hebrew to figure out which one it's referring to. And that's why you have the translation in the English Bible as Psalm 82. And God stood in the midst of the gods and said to them, you're all gods, the bright shining princes of heaven. I'm misquoting that. I'm paraphrasing it, but that's what it says. Yeah, and why have you let the earth go to hell? Are you asking? Let's see. I'm trying to see what you're talking about there, Elderberry. Talking to God in that sense. Why have you let the earth go to hell? I think it's because he made a creation, and he lets that creation do what that creation chooses to do. I tend to be almost a practical deist in my theology, in that I think we used to say of the deists, many of the founding fathers were deists, that God kind of wound up the alarm clock and set it on the shelf and went off to do other things. And I think that God is God an uninvolved God? Does he put his hand into the affairs of men? I know even the founders believed that, and many were deists, that God would put his hand into the affairs of people. But I also think that God, I'm saying I think, I'm expressing opinion. I think opinion based on my study is that God isn't always there to just do everything for us. God has put things in motion. I've often wondered where the Bible says that God is not the author of evil, yet God created Lucifer. Or did he? We're told he did. This is where I start to question Scripture, because I look for that and I say that looks contradictory to each other. He's not the author of evil, but he created the being that became the epitome of evil. What does that mean? What are we supposed to do with that? So let's move on before I get too bogged down into this, because we're going to hit all this stuff. Elohim can also mean any inhabitant of the unseen spiritual world. That's why you'll find it used of God himself, of demons, of the human dead in the afterlife in 1 Samuel. And for the Bible, any disembodied being whose home address is the spirit world is referred to as Elohim. The Hebrew term doesn't refer to a specific set of abilities only God has, but the Bible distinguishes God from the other gods in other ways, not by using the word Elohim. For instance, in the Bible commands the gods to worship the God of the Bible. He's their creator and their king. This is all in the book of Psalms. It says, "No one in heaven is like you, Lord. None of the heavenly beings is your equal." That's in 1 Kings. "You're feared in the council of the holy ones." So even in his divine council, he's feared and respected. The Bible writers are pretty blunt about the God of Israel having no equal, that he's the God of the gods. He is the God of gods. And if you're Islamic, maybe saying the God of Israel, this is the way. Remember, we're talking about the Israelite book, the Hebrew book of faith. But these beings in the council of the holy ones are real. In the first chapter the first verse of Psalm 82, it talks about this divine council of beings that God is standing in the midst of. There was a passage in which God met with his heavenly host to decide how to get rid of King Ahab. Remember that from Monday night? And in that passage, the members of the heavenly group were called spirits. And if we believe the spirit world is real and that it's inhabited by God and by spiritual beings that he's created, such as angels, we have to admit that God's supernatural task force described in those verses is also real. Otherwise, we pay simple lip service to spiritual reality. Yes, there you go, Sarah. That's a good thing to say. Look at this. If you guys want to talk about this topic, you better line up for the captain's cabin. Yeah, which comes right after we're done with the show. We're going to open it up for callers. Monica S. has walked in. Chalkboard asked, do we have free will? Interesting replies in the room. Yeah. So let's continue on with this. Let's see where this goes. Where are we going with this? What is the unseen realm here? The unseen realm is that it seems that there is a pantheon of gods. You look even at Mount Olympus and Zeus and Apollo and Aphrodite and Hera and all these other gods. There was still a superior god over them, but they were all considered gods. So the Bible refers to the divine council as spirits. It refers to them, God refers to them as Elohim. You are all gods. So the gods of Psalm 82 are called sons of the Most High God. And later in the same psalm, the sons of God appear several times in the Bible, usually in God's presence. Job, the book of Job, talks about the sons of God, the Elohim. Job tells us that they were all around before God began to fashion the earth and create humanity. They all already existed in, like we say, eternity past. And that's very interesting because God calls these spiritual beings his sons. He uses that descriptor for these spirit beings. Since he created them, the family language makes sense. In the same way you refer to your offspring as your son or your daughter because you participated in their creation. Bada boom. Yes, I did. But besides being their father, God is also their king. And in the ancient world, kings often ruled through their extended families. Kingship was passed on to heirs. Dominion was a family business. Empire was a family business. God is the Lord of his council in the Old Testament, and his sons had the next highest rank by virtue of their relationship with him. But something's happened. Some of them became disloyal. The wars in the heavens. The sons of God are also decision makers. The Bene Ha-Elohim that we talked about in my own books in relation to the Nephilim stories. We know from 1 Kings 22 and many other passages that God's business involved interacting with human history, which is different than deism. When God decided that it was time for wicked Ahab to die, he left it up to his council to decide how that would happen. And the divine council meetings in Psalm 82 and 1 Kings 22 aren't the only ones related to us in the Bible. Do you know the other ones? Do you remember the stories attached to them? Many of us don't even know they exist. And a couple of them determine the fates of empires, according to Scripture. In Daniel 4, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, was punished by God with temporary insanity. Do you remember that? 7 years. He crawled around like an animal. That sentence was handed down by the decree of the Most High in Daniel 4. And the decree of the Watchers in Daniel 4. The Watchers, weren't they the Bene Ha-Elohim? They were the sons of God who came down to the earth, descended to the earth, and mated with human women and bequeathed the Nephilim. All the way back in Genesis, in the books of Enoch, you have the Watchers that decreed what would happen to King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. Watchers was a term that was used for divine beings of God's council. It referred to how they were ever watchful over the affairs of humanity, and they never slept. And what was it that Nebuchadnezzar said I'm trying to remember the passage where the day his sanity and his wits came rushing back into him, and he sat up after 7 years of being brought low, according to this story, brought low in sanity. They kept him in a pen. He ate grass like the animals, and he had no language he was expressing. And he comes out of this madness. And what's the first thing he does? He offers up a prayer. And in this prayer, he says, "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, do extol the Most High God and find that he is sovereign over the affairs of men." He decrees that. Here's Nebuchadnezzar the Great of Babylon, out of history. Do you read a history book and find the prayer that he made? No, you don't, because that's considered to be part of a book of faith, the Hebrew book of faith. Could you imagine somebody like a Genghis Khan? This is who Nebuchadnezzar was. He was the ruler of the Babylonian Empire during the time of Daniel, which would be, around 500 to 600 BCE. They sacked Israel and they carried all those captive people back to Babylon with them. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, do worship and extol the name of the Most High God, for he is sovereign over the affairs of men. That was interesting. Sarah says, I still take issue with the term gods, as it seems to imply a sense of equivalency. I know that's the English, that's the way we've interpreted in English. Elohim means, basically means God. It's the name of God is in it. God of men. I don't know why we don't just say the name the way the name describes him. Instead of calling him God, we should say God of many gods. The ruling God amongst many gods. A little too wordy, but that's kind of what it means. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, no other Elohim before me. So says commandment number 1. Saul and Solomon, yeah, same thing, Sarah, for them, just like Nebuchadnezzar. Saul, we never saw a repentant Saul, if you will, where he offered up a prayer to God. We saw him call up the ghost of Samuel through the witch at Endor, and then the next, he's killed on the battlefield. Solomon, we do see some where Solomon, the book of Ecclesiastes, all is vanity. He's an old man writing this. All is vanity. I've had everything my hand could ever want. Done everything that, as far as any of your imaginations can take it, I have done it. He had the wealth, he had the power, he had the wisdom. And yet at the end he says, but all was vanity and emptiness. And how does he close that book out? It says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come. All these biblical scenes of divine council sessions tell us God's council, that his council members participate in God's rule. In at least some cases, and at least on the earth. I don't know about anything else out there. Just about the history of humanity, maybe the history of Judaism, the history of the Jews, that they participated in his rule. And in at least some cases, God decrees that he wants what he wants done, but gives all his supernatural agents the freedom to decide the means by which to carry out his work. What was the book of Job, where Job has everything taken away from him? How did that start? It says in the passage in Job, and the Satan came into the courts of heaven. The Satan, article before the word. The Satan, the deceiver. The title, the one who bore the title later of Satan, came in and accused Job. And he says, I'll bet you if you took things away from Job, he would curse you. And God said, no, he won't. He won't curse me. He says, go ahead. He says, you can do everything but take his life. And he'll still. Now, why did God do that? It's a story. I realize it's a story of faith. If that really happened, why does the God who knows everything, knows the future, just brush off the Satan and say, piss off? I already know what he's going to do. So you don't have to do any of that. No, he let Satan destroy him. So in a sense, it was almost once again like the Olympian gods playing a game of celestial chess with the life of Job. Are those same gods, are they there right now, listening to what I'm saying, going, maybe we ought to wreck his car so it wastes his money, for saying stuff like that. But what's the lesson to be learned if you don't know who's doing it? So, Job, everything's taken away. So, angels participate in God's counsel as well as the Elohim. And the terms translated angel in the Old and the New Testaments actually mean messenger. It's basically the word angel is a job description, just like Satan is a job description. Angels deliver messages to people, and we'll talk more about those a little later in some of the things I want to talk about in this series. But here's the big question. When we take all this stuff I've just talked about, the question is, why does any of this even matter? Your reaction to all this stuff we've talked about in a couple of days about the hidden realms, which we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg yet. There's a lot more we're going to do in upcoming days, upcoming episodes. But what implications beyond being fascinating, hearing some of this stuff we haven't heard before, does all this information really have? And if for any at all, what impact does it have on our daily lives? Oh, how should I function with my neighbors, with my place of worship, with the way I interact with government or society? What does any of it have to do with any of that? The answer is the truths that are presented in this study of those scriptures, the truths as they pertain to the scriptures, have everything to do with our understanding of who God is and how we can relate to him. What our purpose is on the earth. And to help clarify that, we're going to unpack a lot more stuff in the upcoming days. So far, we've just talked about God's cosmic administration and what insights those descriptions give us into God, and ultimately how God relates to us. First, God's heavenly family business is a template for how he relates to his earthly family, if you will. And we'll discuss that further. You might have been wondering, why does God need a council? If he's God of everything, why does he need a council? Omniscient, omnipresent, all-knowing, all-loving, all-caring, all holiness, all everything, from eternity past to eternity future, yet to come. Why should God need help doing anything? Even in the spiritual world, isn't he just God? But the Bible's clear that he uses lesser beings to accomplish the things that he wants to get done. Now, there's a part of that, to be very honest, that makes me bristle a little bit. God uses us to accomplish his tasks. I remember there was one point in the first time I heard this way back in my Bible college days. The Philistines were the great enemy of Israel, constantly attacking. David the king was constantly fighting against the Philistines. Goliath of Gath was a Philistine giant. And so we have the Philistines, the epitome of evil against the nation of Israel. Yet at one place, God is speaking, and he says, the Philistines are the finger of my righteousness. And then, whoa, back that up. What does that mean? What the hell does that mean? And Murder Mitten Mayo Monster. Murder Mitten Maya. Hello, Murder Mitten Mayo Monster. Good to have you in here. Nice to see you. Thanks for stopping by. So, who was this God that he's calling the enemies of Israel the finger of his righteousness? Well, all he meant was the Philistines will accomplish my righteous goals, even though they are supposed to be representative of the evil. Delegation doesn't mean that there's a lack of ability. Exactly. And I was getting to that, Sarah, but I hope I don't give that impression. I think there was lack of ability on God's part. He just delegated. He used other people. Monica S. says in the chat room, maybe God is curious and wonders how many times it will take to get closer to whatever his goal is. His thoughts are not our thoughts, maybe. Well, it's like Psalm 55, or I'm sorry, Isaiah 55, where God says to the prophet, he says, how much higher are my ways than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts? As the rain comes down from heaven and waters the earth and then evaporates and goes back up, he says those things. He was using something that men at that time could not comprehend the science behind it. And he says, that's how much higher my ways are than your ways. So don't question me. He says, don't question my ways. And you might be right. His thoughts are not our thoughts, Monica. We used to call, and I've mentioned this before a long time ago. Some of you may remember this. When we're looking at God through the Old Testament, we saw what were different covenants between God and man. Those covenants, we referred to them as dispensations, to use a hoity-toity theological term. And it started with, the covenant with Adam, then the covenant with Adam after the garden, then the covenant with Noah, then the covenant with Abraham, then the covenant with, and on it went, all the way up till the final covenant, which was the Messiah. And though I heard one writer a very long time ago, Philip Yancey, Christian apologist, Christian writer. He was with Christianity Today for years, I think, the magazine. And he said in one of his books, I had a book of his called, I still have it around here somewhere, called Disappointment with God, was the title. It was more a devotional type of a book than a theological book, but certainly setting forth theological principle. And I think it was subtitled something like The Questions We Don't Ask Out Loud. Disappointment with God. And at the beginning, he was talking about trying to, for us in a finite human way, to understand who God was. And he said, the only way I can describe it, he says, is God was like a parent who gave birth to a child. And that child had free will, and then had to learn how to deal with that child as that child was growing up. He says, far be it for me to psychoanalyze God, he said. He says, but I find that God, in giving man free will, created something that had never existed before. And that was something that could tell him no. Or tell him, hey, God, piss off. I don't believe in you. And the dispensations or the covenants, he said, were like a stair step. Each time, each new covenant was a little further out from the original and a little closer up to God. A little further out, a little closer to God. A little further out, a little closer to God. And he called it stair-step dispensationalism. Well, Yancey didn't call it that. One of my seminary professors called it that. These covenants with God, stair-step dispensationalism, is that each new covenant and dispensation was man growing closer to God, God learning better how to deal with his creation, and offering a better way and drawing men closer to him each step. So that's getting that job done, biblically speaking. And God used a lot of different means to make that happen. God seems, says Sarah, to promote some form of separation as well as intimacy. You'll have to describe that one. We'll talk about that maybe in the captain's cabin in a few minutes. So we're getting close to that. Free will encourages sass. Ain't that the truth? I have encountered that in the last day like you wouldn't believe. My young 9-year-old, who you saw interrupting at the beginning of the show, even though she knows she's not supposed to do that, is all sass, piss, vinegar. I don't even like to give it those positive terms. Oh, she's just sassy and full of piss and vinegar. No, she's naughty and she's spoiled, rotten brat some days. That's what I say. Then I look back and she's all right, though. I had an out with my son this afternoon, my 14-year-old. Flynn tends to... I made mention of the fact that, and I don't approach my son with, son, I just need to mention this little thing. Please don't get angry. But my son has this thing that he does. He's very... he's 14, just turned 15 yesterday. And he doesn't out and out disobey or not do what he's asked to do. Okay, I'll get to that a little later. And then pretty soon you realize it's 4 days later and he still hasn't done the thing you've asked him 4 times to do. It's like, son, got to do that. And this evening he and I had a little, he had a blowout. I didn't. I think I handled myself very well, though you might not agree with my methodology. It's a little personal story. My son, we had his start school next week. His first year in high school as a freshman. And he had to go to an orientation type of thing tonight. It was a little less formal than that. Teachers were all there. You could go from room to room, meet the teachers, and so on. Well, he was up playing games again all night long. And he was still sleeping in the middle of the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon. Randy says, has Flynn been up? No. I'll go wake him up. I go, son, you got to get out of bed. You've been sleeping all day. Get up. And this is not a new thing. So this is where school's coming up. And guess what? Summer, a little more leniency to do that stuff. School time, games get shut off 8 o'clock at night. You can stay up till 10, maybe even 11 at 15. But anyway, that's beside the point. And I said, you got to get up, got to get ready. We got to go to this thing at 5 o'clock. We got to be there. So you have 45 minutes. And at 4:45, we're leaving for the school. And he's grumbling. He doesn't want to go. And I'm like, well, you got to go. And technically, he didn't have to be there. And so, but I wanted him to be there. And then he started bucking me on it. Free will. And once he bucked me on it, he says, why do I have to go? I said, because you're bucking me on it. I said, you're giving me grief about it. I said, now you got to get up. You got to get up. If you'd have asked me, I might have talked to mom and blah, blah, blah. She wants you to go. I want you to go. You got to get up. get your butt out of bed. I use that tone of voice. Get your butt out of bed. Get ready. They're also taking school pictures for the yearbook today. That's when they do them now. I said, so, wash your face, put on a nice shirt, and brush your hair. No, he keeps yelling, I'm not going. I go, well, you know what? I said, you've exceeded your nose with me. I said, it's happening, whether you like it or not. I don't need to hear another word. We're done. He gets up and he starts doing what he does, throwing things around, not his stuff. Comes out in the main room now, he's kicking things around, tipping over the footstools. And I go, hey, this has happened before. I'm like, you guys know me. I'm not a pushover. And I certainly don't put up with that kind of bullshit. And I'm like, son, that is enough. You're going. I said, I don't want to hear a word of dissent. I don't want to hear you bang a wall, slab a door. I don't want to hear you kick over a footstool. I don't want to hear anything going on other than, I'm on it, Dad. Go get ready. And then Rainey had to take the other child to the middle school for her orientation, which was at the same time. And so they left. And then Flynn's still pounding around the house. Oh, knock it off. I said, if you pound one more thing around here, slam one more door, say one more terse word, I said, I think I'll just go to your room and start throwing your stuff around. How about that? And he did it again. And I looked at him, and it's almost like the cat on the mantle, tipping over all your stuff. And you're looking at the cat, and you go, cat, don't you dare knock that statuette off of that mantelpiece. And the cat, without taking his eyes off you, will go, swipe, tip, crash. That's what he was doing. So I said, fine. I said, I think I'll go knock some things over in your room. How about that? Let's see how that goes. No, you won't. He yells. Oh, I said, watch me. I said, or you can get in the way and try to stop me. And I walked into his room, and he's got shelves full of his fossils and stuff. And I don't mess with that stuff, even to make a point. But he had this shelf over here with all his little game pieces on it, and there's some Lego things and stuff. And I went, whoosh, and I cleared the shelf. I go, there you go. I said, I think we'll make that a new rule. I said, every time you slam a door around here, every time you act that way, I think I am going to do the same in your room. So you get the idea, this stuff out here, this is my stuff and your mom's stuff. Well, this whole house is, everything belongs to us. I said, if you're going to take out your anger over not wanting to do a task, and many times the same thing has happened just because he doesn't want to do the task he's given. Wash the dishes, take out the garbage, etc. And so I think it made a point. And then we went off together and took him to his class thing, and it calmed down a bit. But there you go. Yeah. Free will encourages sass. My son has free will to express himself. But if you're going to basically flip me off and everything I say becomes something for you to question, not just, Father, why would you ask me to do that? I want to gain knowledge. I want to increase and grow. Please explain to me why you would ask me to do that. No, it's more, fuck off. I'm not doing this. Didn't say that to me. But he defies. It's like, son, you're not in a position to defy. Is that the way God has to treat us sometimes? I don't know. My daughter, same thing. My little spoiled 9-year-old, I love her dearly, sometimes acts like a spoiled rat. I said the same thing. The way she talks to her mom, she yells at Rainey. Rainey's not a pushover either. But it's almost like we become used to it sometimes. You go, wait a minute. She's yelling at you, Rainey. And I say, stop, small child. I said, who are you at 9 years old to speak to your mom that way? Or me, for that matter. I said, that's going to end. And I said, you're going to apologize to your mom. Sorry. I go, no. It's not an apology. I said, you will knock this crap off now. So, is this the same thing with God dealing with free will? Some of my personal stories for 5 minutes mixed in there. Hey, Pearl Jones, I didn't see you over there. I didn't see you come in. So there you go. Could God just predetermine events to make everything turn out the way he wants? Sure. Then he'd have automatons. But he doesn't do that. In the story of King Ahab again, God let his heavenly assistants decide how to carry out his will, what he wanted done. He let them use their free will. And that tells us that not everything is predetermined. And that's true not only in the unseen world, it's true also in our own worlds, like I just described with my own children, in a different way of doing things. In the Bible, the unseen world has a structure. God's like the CEO. Those that work for him are his family. It's the family. Fat Jehovah would be very happy should you not do that. So they share dominion. They participate in how the company runs. And amazingly enough, the Bible talks the same way about humanity. From the very beginning in Eden, God created humanity to rule the earth with him, we're told in the book of Genesis. God told Adam and Eve, have many children, so that your descendants will live all over the earth and bring it under their control. And Adam and Eve were the children of God. God's earthly family. God wanted to live with them, wanted them to participate in making the whole world like Eden. So there's this familiar, except for me, he threw in that whole thing of putting temptation in their path. And again, the Bible tells us God will never tempt us with evil. But God did say, I'm going to put you in this magnificent garden of paradise. A paradise like you've never seen. Of course, you've only been alive for a day, so however long it took. But God said, everything is yours. Subdue it. Make it yours. Control it. We'll rule this together. But except for the trees at the center of the garden, don't touch those. What's the first thing they do? Well, I don't know. Maybe it took 1,000 years. I think it happened rather quickly, understanding human nature a bit. Nakash, the serpent character, never calls him a snake in the Old Testament or in the book of Genesis. But hey, if you eat of the fruit of this tree, you're really going to die. And then teaches the forbidden knowledge of the gods. Whole nother story that we can get into. I've gone into that story many times. So this is all a familiar concept to us. What isn't so apparent is that Adam and Eve weren't the only members of God's family in Eden. His divine family was there too. Eden was where God lived, and where God lives, and so does his family. We think of heaven as a place where we'll live with God and his angels, according to Christian theology, his divine family. That's the way it was originally intended to be, according to the book of Genesis, and the way it's prophesied to eventually become. It's no coincidence that the Bible, as we have it in the form we have it, ends with the heaven coming back to earth in a new global Eden in Revelation 21 and 22. We're going to go back this next time into the Garden of Eden a little bit when we get to the next episode on this. To understand our destiny as the Old Testament scriptures write it, or the Bible writes it, we have to go back to that time when God's two families occupied the same space. We need to go back to that garden and take a look at that. There's a lot more to discuss about this. All right. There you go. Sometimes I take great pains to try to be ecumenical about my presentation. I certainly have my biases about theology, just like I do about politics. But I try to present an open-minded picture, because I think sometimes theology gets a little messy when we have this hard, rigid. We've got to understand what it is, what it means, what it's all about. And Gabriel Ibanez, is that how that's pronounced? With the little over the N? Perea, he says, Buenos dias. If I'm pronouncing it, desde Madrid, España. So you're from Madrid, Spain? Buenos dias. Good. Nice to have you here, Gabriel. And there's that name again. Gabriel. L at the end of the name. Gabriel. Name of God. So let's do this. We're going to wrap this for tonight. We're going to take a little break, but we're going to come back with the after show, the Captain's Cabin. We got about a half an hour, and you can call into the show, and we'll discuss some of these things, or discuss anything you want to discuss. You can be on camera. You don't have to be on camera. You can have your camera off and just your sound up if you want. But come on in and let's talk about it. And so for now, let's. Monica says that chalkboard was my first ethics class. Thank you for sharing your experience. You're welcome. You're welcome, Monica. Stick around, Monica, Gabriel, and everybody else, because we're going to go out for a break, a couple of minutes, and we'll be back with the Captain's Cabin. So all of you, if you've got to take off now, thanks for being here. And we'll see you next time, or we'll see you over in the Captain's Cabin in a couple of minutes. Sit tight, stay put, live long, and prosper.
The Intrepid Radio Program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey folks, this is Scotty Roberts, and this is the Intrepid Radio Broadcast. I've been broadcasting for about 20 years now, covering such topics as science, politics, the paranormal, weird science, weird world history, archaeology, and the paranormal. Everything from ghosts to cryptids to creepy things that go bump in the night. So every week I bring you 3 new episodes. Come and join my channel and also be a patron to this site. So see the details below, and we'll see you here. Dave, I love you, brother.
I miss you too.
I miss you too, I heard.
Yep,
Did you guys hear that?
I heard that.
I miss you, Dave. Well, and welcome to the captain's cabin. Good to have you all. Glad that you stuck around for a few more minutes of conversation. Nice to have you here. I posted into the chat room the address where you can go to call into this show live. And you can either be on here with your camera on or just your sound on. If you don't want to show your face, that's fine too. And so if you want to talk about the show, there it is. There's the link. Would love to hear what some of you have to say and what you think about what's going on here. And by the way, I just looked in the monitor, so I noticed I'm going to mention it. My nose looks really red tonight. Now, nothing wrong. It doesn't hurt. Nothing wrong with it. It's that thing that old guys get. Their noses turn red and bulbous and veiny and all of that. So I went and finally saw a doctor about that to find out this isn't just sunburn, is it? And it's been building over the years, and it looks different under the light. I went out with my friends Cara and Marion last weekend, and while Rainey was gone, and he said, I see on the show every now and then. And he says, your nose looks a lot more red on air than it does in person. And it does. It's the lighting, folks. It's the way the light works. So I've got to do something with my lights, my studio lights, get them set up. One of these days, I'll get around to doing that. So it casts things in a little better light. But the really bright white light, something that just illuminates the Rudolph in me. So, and my doc gave me some stuff to put on it. She said, there's nothing we can do to change it. It's done is done. It's just, I don't even know how she referred to it. She said it's almost like a weird strain of acne. I said, but I never had acne as a kid. A couple of pimples once in a while, but that was it. She said, this is different. And unchecked, unattended, untreated, I could get one of those big bulbous veiny noses. So by the time I was 80, I'd have this big old round schnoz like Carl Malden or Mr. Magoo. So if you remember who I'm talking about with that. So I got stuff I got to put on, just a little like lotion every day. There it is. She said that'll help it not get any worse. And she said we can stop it from getting worse. We just can't stop it, take back what's already been done. So it's like losing my hair or it turning white. Can't do anything to reverse that process. So it's there. It's permanent. So I just thought I'd mention that because there it is. Out in the open. It's like, there's hey, Scott Allen. Good to see you. I see your, is that a live long and prosper on there or just a hand waving? I can't make those out without my cheating glasses. And folks, this is the informal part of the show. It's just a wave. So feel free to come in and be informal. Let's talk a little bit. We got about 20 minutes. And if you want to bring anything up and chat a bit about it, I hope you're enjoying this little series. I like this stuff because it challenges the way we think about things. Now, maybe you didn't grow up Judeo-Christian. You didn't go to Sunday school. You didn't go to synagogue. You didn't learn these stories. It's funny. So there are sometimes people I come across that don't know anything about even the Noah and the Ark story. And I thought, that seems odd to me, because I had learned that when I was a little kid. I'm going to see what I'm seeing in my camera. What is all that stuff over there? Oh, it's a box with a bunch of burlap bags in it. I got these from a coffee company. I got a bunch of these about a year ago. A couple of years ago. I thought they were very cool. They had them for sale for $1 or $2 a piece. And they're bags. The coffee beans came in to this coffee company. Clean coffee from Guatemala. So I got a bunch of this. I thought those would be kind of cool to put stuff in. I haven't done anything with them yet. I don't know. Maybe I should stuff them, sew them shut, and throw them on the family room floor. Here's a burlap pillow for your head. Don't drool on it. So there you go. There's the hammer I was looking for earlier today, too. I said, I know there's a hammer laying around here. There it is. All right. So what's going on with everybody else? What's going on? What do you want to do? If you have a chance and you're sitting in the YouTube channel, hit the like button, the thumbs up button, please. That helps my numbers, which is an important thing when you're doing this. I was just doing this on the side, and but if you're trying to make it something that this is, I want to make it good. I want to make it good for you. I want to do more of it. I'd go back to daily shows, but I just can't afford to take the time. But there you go. Did you hear that RFK Jr. is likely going to drop out to endorse Trump and make sure Harris doesn't win? That's probably the best move he could make, Scott Allen. I got to tell you. That is, you should call in and talk about it, Scott. But I was wondering about that just a couple of weeks ago. I thought RFK has got to know by now he's not going to win the election. What's the best move he could make? And for him to make a move like that, he could stay in the race and just take the votes as they come and pile them up. So for next time, if he wants to run, he can say, I got this much of the vote, or build his base and keep it going. No, you know what he is doing? He's dropping out for the good of the country. Cannot have a Harris-Walz administration for the good of this country. And their RFK just sealed. I've always liked RFK. I liked him at the beginning. It was a toss-up for me at the beginning. Do I want to go RFK? Do I want to go Trump? And he'll drop out. He's likely going to drop out and endorse Trump to make sure that Harris does not win. And you know what's funny to me is that a Kamala Harris and a Tim Walz ticket, it's funny to me that, funny, that there's even a possibility that they could win. I'm flabbergasted by that. I know people have their own political ideologies that they operate under, but my God, people, do you hate Trump that much to say we've got to put Kamala Harris in, who will more than likely, it sounds like superlatives being used, but a Harris presidency is going to take us down the tubes. We are not in a good place. This is why they don't let her talk about the points. There you go, Elvis. I agree with you. Yeah, it makes me appreciate him even more too, Scott Allen. He says it makes it appreciate him even more. It means he's not about ego. It's for the good of the country. Exactly. And I appreciate that about what he's doing. I still am holding out for a Tulsi Gabbard run at the presidency again. I'd like to see that happen. I'm okay with JD Vance. I got no problem with him being Trump's presidential pick. Trump's pretty good at picking people for what he needs. Although I didn't think Pence was a good choice either. I don't think JD Vance is a bad choice at all. I'm happy. I'm just fine with JD Vance. But I had my preferences. I would love to have seen him bring Tulsi Gabbard on board. That would have been a great ticket, I think. I know so many people who hate Trump, says Scott Allen. They hate him enough that they'll vote for anyone but him. Exactly. I've seen some men on the street interviews in the last couple of days. People are voting for Harris and they can't tell you why. Well, why? What about her? Which one of her policies did you like the best over the last 4 years? They go blank. Nobody can name why. There was one guy that was all very strong and very forward. Yes, I'm all Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and this and that. And well, can you tell us why? And he stumbled and stammered. Then he kind of looked at the camera. He says, please don't use that. People don't know why. The only cogent reason they can come up with, I saw from two kind of mindless seeming college-age girls that said, well, I guess it's because she's not Trump. Anything but Trump. And the other girl, her friend with her, said, yeah, what she said. And, hey, Kalina, good to see you. Long time. And so I think, folks, I got people in my own family that are voting Harris rather than vote for Trump. And I'm like, come on, you're smarter than that. You don't want this person as president of the United States. Because it's not as much about her as it is about the administration and the people in power now that don't want to lose those power positions, that want her running. And that's why you have somebody who doesn't know a damn thing being pushed to be the president. Oh, she's joyful. She's so joyful. It's so full of joy. You can't run a country on joy. I just shake my head some days. I shake my head. Did you know that this Democratic Party, I just saw some headlines that were being shown today from just a few months ago. How do we ensure the Democratic Party saying, how do we ensure Kamala Harris does not become the next president? Lines like that, very similar to that. I can't remember the news outlets. Some of them were like the Washington Times or whatever, the Washington Post, whatever. And they were saying things like, nobody in the Democratic Party wants Kamala Harris in office. How long can Joe hold out? Kind of thing. And yet here now they've done the 180 on her because they see the marketing effort that they have in place is going to be something where they could very possibly take the presidency again. And it maintains the power for all of those people that are there now. Yeah, Kalina, we were just talking about that. She says, not certain if you heard JFK Jr. is allegedly dropping out and he's going to endorse Trump because he thinks the worst thing that could happen to this country is Kamala Harris. Scott Allen just brought that up about 5 minutes before you walked in here. So that's a good move. He's a good man. I think he would have made a great president. Don't agree with him on everything. But that's the thing. You don't have to agree with the president on everything. You have to agree with the basic direction that they're taking the country. I don't see Trump as a egomaniac, narcissist, no more than any other CEO. I don't see him as somebody that would run the country out of that. But that's the line that the left has everybody believing that's supporting the left. It's sad. It's too bad. So I didn't think we'd have anything to fear about the Biden administration maintaining their seat of power. And then when they forced Joe Biden out and put her in, the party that's been preaching to us about democracy, saving democracy from the evil MAGA people and the evil dictator, would-be dictator, who never will leave office if you put him in. Well, he already did once, remember. All those compiled lies on the left. I would think that those of you on the left who have genuine beliefs about certain political ideologies and policies and things that you agree with that are opposite of what conservatives might believe, that are genuine about it, from your heart from it, I would think that would piss me off if my only option was being the one forced on me in Kamala Harris. And I'd either protest and not vote at all, or I'd vote for the other guys. I probably wouldn't vote at all. But I certainly wouldn't vote for those people. The people that lied to you about Joe Biden, the people that lied to you about Kamala Harris. And they didn't lie about Kamala Harris. They're lying about her now because it's contradictory to everything they've said up until just a couple of months ago. Do you guys not see it? That's what throws me. I think that's what frustrates me a little bit, is the people who don't see it. And I don't think it's not that they don't see it. I think it's that they don't want to see it. They want to maintain their hatred of Trump as being more important than putting the person in the office that will do better things for the country. Doesn't matter to them. She fills the women migrant swing, was my thought, said Monica. Yeah, maybe. I think there's a hell of a lot of women that would never vote for Kamala Harris in a heartbeat. What did the left do when there were other women candidates, but they weren't of the Democratic Party or of a leftist persuasion, but were conservative? What was her first name? Fiore. When she was running, was it 2016? They absolutely decimated her. She was a woman. What do you got in Tulsi Gabbard, who I think is an amazing woman? Left the Democratic Party because of what they did to her. She was a Democrat. Didn't agree with everything she said, but man, is she on the spot. Go look her up on Instagram if you have it, or Facebook, and listen to the things she has to say. Like I said, I would have loved to have seen her run with Donald Trump and set her up to be the next president. I would have loved to have seen her as president. But what happened to her? The left absolutely castigated her. Hillary Clinton called her an agent of Russia, an agent of the Russian government. Hillary Clinton's not an idiot, but she certainly is a skank. I got to tell you, to say stuff like that, there's no milder way to put that. And they really pushed her out. They didn't give her any legitimacy. She was a woman. Hillary Clinton, don't you think, when she was running against Trump, don't you think it's time for a woman to be president of the United States? And I said, for the sole reason of a woman being the president of the United States? No. But hey, if there's a woman that is qualified to do the job, bring it. I liked Carly Fiore. I think, what's her name? Carly Fiore? Fiore. I don't remember her first name. But I liked Tulsi Gabbard even better. Last election. Tulsi would have been phenomenal. Kalina, you're right. She still would be. And I hope that she makes that happen. I got no problem with a woman being president. I got no problem with a person of color being a president. But those are the things they tried to tell you if you were against Kamala Harris. You were a misogynist or a racist. Shame on them for putting that on the American people. Shame on the Democratic Party for saying such shittery as that. Oh. But you know where it works? It works with the regular folks of the country that don't think through anything. They go with the flow, or they vote their party. They support what the party says without thinking. In this day and age, the age of information, where we have information at our fingertips, there shouldn't be anybody that would, with good sense and good intelligence intact, vote for a Kamala Harris Tim Walz ticket. I will go out on a branch and say, if you vote for them, you are not thinking very well, or you're thinking with something else other than your brain. Wouldn't you rather have somebody in office that you don't like very well, but that will do a good job fixing the country? I'd rather have that. Like I've said, I'll vote for a 34-time convicted felon before I'll vote for Kamala Harris. Well, of course, I don't believe that any of that was legitimate. Now, that's going to come down, too, on September 19th. Judge Merchan is going to sentence Donald Trump. What's he going to be sentenced to? Is he going to put him in jail? Is he going to say you're guilty and 1 year sentence in jail, but suspend it? What's he going to do? We don't know what's going to happen. But remember, Judge Merchan is a Democratic activist. So what's he going to do? What's the Democratic Party telling him he needs to do? Can we prove that? Should never have happened. That trial should never have even taken place. So we'll see what happens. Usually in cases like that, your first time out, he's never committed a crime. The guy's 78 years old, never committed a crime, never been put in jail. That they don't throw the book at you. Let's see what happens with Merchan. It'll be interesting, huh? See where that goes in the night. Maybe Merchan will rise to the occasion and not put him in jail. But there is scuttlebutt already, and I've heard this from different sources, not my sources, sources that have sources, that say they're already working at Rikers Island to prepare for a Donald Trump being imprisoned there, a former president. Is that true? I don't know. What's it mean? Don't know. What do you think? If Donald Trump gets imprisoned on the 19th of September, what do you think is going to happen in the election? Be interesting, wouldn't it? Kalani, you're right. Hillary should never have been the Dem candidate. It should have been Bernie. They pushed him out too. All right, guys. No calls tonight. It's now 11 o'clock. We're going to wrap this, baby. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for being part of, really not to be sing-songy, but part of my life, part of the show. This show, I've been doing this show for 24 years in one form or another. And the last 5 years in this show, in this incarnation. And so we've gotten to know each other. You become a part of who I am, part of what I do. This show is a part of who I am and what I do. This show, the archives of this show, when I'm dead and gone, will be the journal, the journal, the diary. I was going to say of my life. This is who I am. Thank you for sharing it with me. Thanks for being here. And we'll see you next time. It's going to be Friday. We'll be back same time. And hope to see you there. And again, thank you for coming out tonight. Let's get out of here. All right. Live long and prosper.